Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. Welcome to this week's edition of Kibbitzing with Kagan, brief conversations with people I find fascinating. Today, my special guest is David Blair, my candidate for county executive. So sometimes when I interview people, it's to give you both sides. This is not that. This is to let you learn more about my preferred choice to be our next county executive. So David, thank you so much for taking time today to kibitz.
Thank you, Cheryl, for having me on. It's a pleasure to see you.
Thank you, always. So let's start. There are a lot of folks who still don't know you. So why don't you start with telling us about where you grew up, your childhood, where you went to school, and how you started off?
Oh, sure. So I am a lifelong Montgomery County resident. I actually grew up in Darnestown, Maryland. And it's one of the things I love about Montgomery County is having grown up here, perspective I have of the schools. I went to Darnestown Elementary School. That was wonderful. Clearly in Darnestown, there's a lot of wide open places, and I love that. Though my stomping ground growing up was really much more Gaithersburg and Montgomery Village. That's where our friends tended to be. I have an older brother and a younger sister, and I can remember my mom and dad dropping us off at Lake Forest Mall, and that was a big thing. So that's where we grew up, and have stayed here obviously my entire life.
That's great. So you started a business. Why don't you tell us about that? And it was super successful. Tell us what it did.
Well, so I was blessed. My dad was an entrepreneur. And so growing up as a kid, I would see him start businesses. And so it didn't seem overly complicated. And it seemed like, I'm like, oh, well, I can do that someday. And I think had he been a doctor or an engineer or something like that, I'd say like, oh, I can do that too. Where now I'm like super intimidated by doctors or engineers. That sounds like you have to be really smart to do that. And so when I was, I guess, in my mid 20s, 25, 26, started a business. Actually started it originally with my brother and I, bid on a small business set aside contract. And I remember the contract paid $250,000 a year for the whole contract for the whole year. And we thought that was more money than you can imagine. And we had to hire like 3 or 4 people, and we were basically administering COBRA health benefits for folks that left the military. It was a really simple program, and we did that, and did that for a couple of years, and then the business kept morphing and growing, ultimately into a $1 billion Fortune 500 company in Rockville. But I think one of the things that I say, Cheryl, a lot is we're so lucky in Montgomery County because while I'm from Montgomery County, we've really attracted the best and brightest from around the country, from around the world that live here. So when you think about the business we had in Rockville, and you look at my executive team, they were from all over the world, and it was great. And I think about the potential we have here. There's no doubt we can be creating great businesses and great jobs.
So there are people who would say, ooh, you worked in big, in healthcare. Were you part of big pharma? Why don't you talk about exactly what your business did?
Oh, sure. So what the opportunity that we saw was prescription drugs were going through the roof. They were getting crazy expensive. And what's interesting is so many of the decisions that were being made, our federal government was doing. Like there was a time that we didn't advertise drugs on TV, right? And so all of a sudden, the FDA loosened the restrictions, and they were advertising drugs on TV. And these drugs oftentimes were no better than their generics. And so what we did is we called it pricing transparency. And there's other companies that have continued, like you'll hear GoodRx every once in a while is out there, to let the consumers know what the drug costs truly are. And Cheryl, one of our biggest clients, AARP, approached us because clearly this hurts seniors the most. And so AARP,
the American Association of Retired Persons. I'm sure everybody knows AARP, but yes.
Yeah, no, but they approached us for like, how can you help our seniors with their drug costs? And so oftentimes there's a lower cost generic, or there's an over-the-counter product that can save a senior, or really anybody, significant money. And so that was really the business model, and we grew that, and we had a lot of momentum because it kept getting work. The drug manufacturers kept raising prices, and so our services were more and more valuable.
And you sold the company.
Yes.
Okay, and you and your wonderful wife, Michael, set up the Blair Family Foundation. Why don't you talk about your community engagement and philanthropy?
So thank you, Cheryl. So my wife and I, yes, it's the David and Michael Blair Family Foundation, and we were so incredibly blessed to build the business and sell it, and candidly made more than we should have ever made. And so we set up a foundation to give back. And so it's not incredibly formal. Like, it's basically my wife and I sitting at the kitchen table, right? Yep. Going through it. And each year we think about what our priorities are for the upcoming year and where we think we could add the most value. Generally, we love to join boards too. So my wife and I have also been part of boards. And the types of things that we have supported, anything that really touches education. So early childhood education, after school programs, summer programs, big into education. Children that have been challenged with learning differences is something that we're passionate about. Healthcare has been a passion of ours. So mental health, so you'll see us a lot involved in healthcare. And then if there's a kind of a third leg to this, I would say low-income families. So whether it's fighting homelessness or food insecurity, those are probably the three big initiatives that we spend the bulk of our time and contributions.
So let's talk for a moment about USG, Universities at Shady Grove, and the Entrepreneurship Lab, which is also part of education and something that is unique and really valuable here in Montgomery County. Why don't you talk about your goals, your vision for that?
So when I started, I said how blessed I was that my dad was an entrepreneur. So it seemed easy. Well, so many people aren't exposed to that.
Yes.
And here in Montgomery County, we actually, this is scary. We have less businesses in Montgomery County today than we did 10 years ago. But that's not true of the region. The region has tens of thousands of new businesses. And that's really important because that's our tax base, those businesses. And so we've got to get that going. And so one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to bring entrepreneurship to the community. And so we opened up an Entrepreneurship Lab at the Universities of Shady Grove. And it's incredible. We have mentors, we have incubator space. There's obviously classes, so you attend classes. We have a speaker series, and the speaker series is open up to anybody in the community. It's not just students. And then there's a competition. We've had 500 students, gone through some element of this. And then Cheryl, is so much fun because they let me be a judge, right? Nice. And so we had, it was a December class. The class was graduating last December. I did the competition, and I see these young men and women come in. They present their businesses. They're from all over the world. I mean, this is what's great about this county. They're all over the world. They had really great ideas. So then we provide them with some seed funding. Nice. And so that's a role. And I would love to do that with our high schools. I'd love to figure out how we could have entrepreneurship opportunities for all of our high school students, because I think it's a great mindset.
So just to clarify, you're not running the Entrepreneurship Lab. You came up with the idea, you helped launch it, and you were a judge in the contest, but you're not involved on a day-to-day basis, right?
So no, I mean, when I think about my role, it was really, I was able to convene the business leaders. I bet we had 4 or 5 roundtables. No, that's 12 roundtables with community leaders, basically going through what the program elements should be.
Yes.
And then my job was to recruit the executive director, Mark Starrett, who runs it. He's great.
Yeah.
And then I also recruited the board of directors. Okay. And then I still serve on the board. I'm still a board member, and I talk to Mark probably every couple of weeks. We touch base, but no, I'm not involved in the day-to-day operations.
Okay. So after all of this success in business and this wonderful childhood and great family and beautiful kids and a lovely wife and all that, and your wife is an entrepreneur and successful and all that, and engagement in the community, you decided to get involved in politics. So tell me why you decided to run for county executive in 2018. What motivated you?
So Cheryl, and so it's really personal. So I mentioned earlier, I grew up in Gaithersburg and kind of Montgomery Villages, where that was my stomping ground. And I hadn't been there in 15 years or so. And all of a sudden I went back there, and I couldn't believe the level of poverty or the condition of our schools. And I was incredibly sad. I was like, how is this Montgomery County? And so at the time I was working with an organization in Washington, D.C. called the Bipartisan Policy Center.
Yep.
And they challenged me, and they said, if you want to have the biggest impact on people's lives, run for local office. That Congress or Senate, might sound more appealing, but if you actually want to improve lives, go local. And so this is all about how can we make Montgomery County great for future generations. And I'm inspired by the people that live here. I know we can do it. We have the resources and the people. So that was kind of what triggered it. But then candidly, Cheryl, through my nonprofit initiatives and through running, I've been exposed to so much more, right? Like so much more need. Like so that first initial kind of aha moment has only been reinforced over the past, many years.
So you talked about the bipartisan center. You were a Republican when you first registered. So let's talk about that, since that's the elephant in the room, and people may know that or remember that. Why were you a Republican, and why did you switch parties? What do you identify with as a Democrat now?
So when I turned 18, I registered to vote. My dad was a Republican, and I don't know that I put a lot of thought into that decision at the time, but I registered as a Republican. And then over the next 10, 12 years, I noticed that I was consistently voting for the Democratic candidates and realizing that my values aligned with the Democrats. And so about 20 years ago, I have formally switched my party affiliation to as a Democrat, because that's how I view myself, and with all those values that it means. I say this. I say this sometimes when I start, like, who are you? I talk about my mom. My mom was a public school teacher, and she used to always say to me, David, when a door opens up for you, it's your duty to reach back and pull the next person through. And I just think about that as like that. I think that's the value of Montgomery County, and that's the value of a Democrat, and that's what we do.
Okay.
That's how I approach things.
So you lost that race last time by 77 votes, which is just heartbreaking. Talk briefly about what that was and how you kind of decided to circle back and stay engaged.
Well, so it was tough, and I didn't sleep through the night for about 3 months. And I would wake up at like 3 o'clock in the morning. I started walking around the house, and then one day, it was probably like in September, all of a sudden I woke up and I was like, oh my gosh, I made it through the night. Because you chew on that, like, I could have done one more
I should have. Right. It's crazy.
And I was hopeful that the current executive would do a good job, and I met with him and talked to him about where I thought the priorities were. And then a couple of years after he was in, I reached the realization, okay, he's a good guy in the wrong job, and this county needs fresh leadership to address some of the problems that we talked about.
So, golly, so where do we go from here? So you decided to run again. Let me say for the record here that Mark Elrich and I have been friends since the early 90s. We have hung out together. He's a nice guy to drink a beer with. I think he's smart, and he's my friend, but I'm not supporting him for county executive, nor did I 4 years ago. So I just want to say that publicly. So why don't you talk about where you think he has fallen short, and what made you decide to get back in and go again?
So Cheryl, let me first echo some of your comments. So I've gotten the chance to know Mark pretty well over the past 7 or 8 years. One, alphabetically, we sit next to each other in these debates. We have, for your listeners probably won't realize how many debates there are. This morning was number 30, and we did probably 35 last time.
And to be clear, we're about 55 days away from primary election day. So this, as we tape this, so that's a lot more to come probably.
There are a lot more. Yeah. So he's incredibly smart. He has a passion for public service, and as I mentioned, but he's a good guy in the wrong job. And what this job requires is executive leadership. And executive leadership is pulling together a team of talented people, setting a bold vision, delegating, removing obstacles, holding people accountable, and getting things done. And what I see in this county is over and over again, we talk about things, we do a study, maybe do a pilot, we have a work group, we do it endlessly. And meanwhile, surrounding counties are running laps around us. And you can pick this, whether it's economic development, the environment, you name it, you see it elsewhere. And I know that we could be doing that here in Montgomery County with the right leadership.
Yes. I remember when I first got involved in politics back in Montgomery County, people used to talk about paralysis by analysis. And that's exactly what you just described. Another study, another work group. Yeah, it's nuts. David, for those who may not know your issue stances. I'm going to run through really fast. If you can just give me a phrase, a statement, a sentence or two on each of these. First off, especially as we are reeling from another horrible gun tragedy. So what's your stance on gun control?
Yes. Yeah, it's outrageous that someone can purchase a military weapon. It's unconscionable. I am so livid that we live in a place that that's allowed to happen. I just can't believe it. And I think what we really need to do, because our federal government has dropped the ball on this, is what we got to think about. What can we do locally to protect our churchgoers, our students, people going to the grocery store? Like, how are we going to protect ourselves from this madness?
Yes. Abortion rights.
Oh, so we've got to do everything we can to help women with their health choice, and just like gun control, I think again we got to think locally, because it looks like the Supreme Court is going to drop the ball on this, take us back 50 years, and so what can we do to protect women's rights locally has got to be apparent. And Senator, you'll be challenged in Annapolis too. That you'll have to help as well.
We've done it and we will do more, I'm sure. 270, we have, I think, some different positions on this one. Why don't you talk briefly about that one?
Oh, sure. So we've got to do everything we can to relieve traffic congestion. Let's start at the American Legion Bridge. And if you think the bottleneck is bad now at the American Legion Bridge, wait until Virginia's managed lanes connect to it. So they're building those lanes now. So we've got to fix the American Legion Bridge and then the west part of 495 to 270. As county executive, my job is going to be make sure that we minimize the impact to private properties, that it's environmentally doesn't have a big impact. We need to make sure that the tolls are reasonable. And most importantly, that those tolls go pay for the public transit that we so desperately need. But Cheryl, that's just one tool in the toolbox. If you want, we can talk about Ride On, we can talk about Purple Line. I mean, we've got to really rethink transportation, because we've been left behind surrounding jurisdictions, I would say.
Good. Climate.
Hey, I got the Sierra Club endorsement.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, Cheryl, going the paralysis by analysis that you said. It's interesting how the Sierra Club and I differed on a number of things, like 495, the 495 bridge. But yet they realize that if we're going to reach our goal of zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2035, we need action now. And I'm committed to tripling our solar power. I'm committed to curbside composting so we can close the incinerator. And so I can go on and on. But yeah, we've got to do everything we can to address climate change.
Pre-K.
Absolutely. My wife tells me they have it in Oklahoma and we don't have it here. My wife's from Oklahoma. And she's always like, David, we have pre-K in Oklahoma. They have it in West Virginia, they have it in DC. Yeah, and Cheryl, this is why I advocated so hard for you're familiar with it, called the Blueprint for Maryland's Future.
We are totally going to get to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
School resource officers.
So we've got to do everything we can to protect our kids. And then we also have to make sure that the school resource officers don't over police our Black and brown students. And they were never there. They were never there to enforce minor infractions. And I think we can have it both ways. I think we can keep our kids safe. I think that the students can feel respected, and we'll have zero tolerance for any kind of racial bias that's happening in the schools. So right. I think there's a way to make it work for everyone.
Last one on this list, economic development. How do we revitalize post-COVID?
So this is key, because the economic development is what pays for everything that we need. So all those values that I described in Montgomery County, the schools, social services, libraries, right? That comes from a healthy tax base. And so I've probably put as much work into an economic development plan for Montgomery County as anything I've done over the past 10 years, meeting with hundreds of business owners, employees, Chamber of Commerce, you name it, on how we can get this economy going. I won't go through all of the things right now, Cheryl, with you, but suffice to say, I think we got a great plan which leverages the assets that are already here in the county.
Perfect. So you referenced the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, also known as the Kerwin Commission, which we voted on. You were a very active leader in Montgomery County, and that is a 10-year plan to improve Maryland's public schools. Why don't you talk a bit about what you did and what you think is important about it?
Sure. So this is a 10-year plan to get Montgomery County, well, really get all of Maryland schools back on track, but I'm keenly focused clearly on Montgomery County. And so it starts with early childhood education. If you don't start early, when these kids get to kindergarten, they're not ready to learn. And so there's actually programs that are for the 0 to 3-year-olds, like giving moms and dads books when their baby is born, talking about nutrition, brain development. Like there's things that we can do. There's programs around the country that have proven to do this. We should be doing that here. Kerwin talks a lot about pre-K. We need to have pre-K. It's critical. And then kind of moving through public schools to career readiness. We need to make sure that 100% of our high school seniors that are graduating, or if they're not graduating, if they're dropping out, whatever it might be, are ready to go to college. They can pass their Maryland entrance exams, or we've trained them in a career. And we're not doing that today. And it's the numbers are really alarming. So this spring, 12,000 students will be finishing their senior year. It's estimated 3,000 will not be trained in a career nor ready to go to college. So we're sentencing them to like minimum wage jobs. Like that has got to stop. So those are some of the things that are occurring, but also increasing teacher pay, yes, increasing teacher diversity, accountability, clear metrics. Those are the types of things that are in Kerwin that are also equally as important.
100%. So a lot of voters are cynical that, and I hate the word politician, like it really makes me angry, but that a candidate is all about self-serving advancement and all that. So, but you're different from that. And that's part of how I went from endorsing someone else to endorsing you this time. And that's because of the way you stepped up during COVID. So why don't you talk about some of the ways you connected to community and some of the ways that you led for neighbors in need?
So Cheryl, at the time that COVID hit, I was working. We have a mobile home park in Germantown, and I was working.
Sorry, let me interrupt. When you say we, are you talking about you and Michael, like own it, or you just mean it exists?
I guess. It just exists.
It exists. There is one.
There is one. There's a mobile home park in Germantown.
Yes.
And I was working to open up a social service hub there, like to rent one out and to bring the services to that community that needed them, like fresh food, access to computers, internet. That's when COVID hit. And we were working with the Blackhawk Center for the Arts. And actually I toured it the day before the governor shut down Maryland. I saw all this beautiful artwork there.
I love Black Rock. Great place to go hear live music. Yes.
It's a wonderful asset. And what was great, Cheryl, is we converted the Blackhawk Center for the Arts into a hub overnight. Like literally truckloads of food was getting dropped off. We were boxing them, repackaging them, getting them out to the community. And then one of the things that you got to love about Montgomery County is we basically have a nonprofit for everything, right? So it's not like you don't really have to create a nonprofit because they already exist. You just have to find them.
Yep.
And so we started working with like Nourish Now, Nana Foods, and really to coordinate the effort and get the food out. But Cheryl, if I could just share one thing that, but one thing that didn't exist, because my wife and I are like, okay, how can we help other than just rolling up our sleeves and packing boxes? Was we were so sympathetic to the parents with young children at home, and I remember they were all Zooming, and we have kids at home, and how consuming that can be. And so we put together activity kits, and they were really fun. And they were like, I don't know, maybe 2 feet by 2 feet and 6 inches high. They had about 50 different activities for the kids to do. And it was as much for the kids to learn as it was to give the parents a break. And we ended up distributing thousands of those to low-income families. And another thing, we put information, bilingual information, to the parents on how they could access. Well, at the time it was how to get tested, right? Because we were just trying to figure out how to get tested for COVID. Right. And then later it was like, where do you get your vaccination and stuff like that.
Yep. Amazing. Yeah. So yeah. I was personally very inspired and impressed by that. So thank you for your leadership and your service in that way. We have a few more questions and then we'll get to the Fast Five. So first off, can you tell us briefly how you would work with the county council and with legislators, members of the Montgomery County delegation in the House and Senate serving in Annapolis?
Yeah, so this is where I think leadership and collaboration is so important, right? And so we're gonna have a new county council, right? We're going from 9 to 11. We'll have 5 or 6 new members of the council probably. So part of it is coming together with an aligned vision. We're all going to be a little bit different, but what are the big bold things that we want to accomplish? And I see the same thing in Annapolis, which is I would love to work with you and your colleagues and say, okay, David, this is what we need to get done at the county level because we're going to get this done at the state level, or vice versa. And so I can say, I need help at, let's say, White Flint. Like I need like whatever it might be. Or you can say, hey, David, we're not going to be able to get this passed at the state level. Maybe you can get it passed at the local level, and then we can bring this back up the next year. So I see this about collaboration and vision.
Love it. Love it. Amen. And I can tell you from personal experience, it completely doesn't happen now. We have a wonderful intergovernmental relations team, so I don't want to be slighting them in any way, but they're not getting the direction on the big vision. So thank you for that. So talk about, you mentioned the Sierra Club having endorsed you. Do you want to mention, other than me, some of the endorsements that you've gotten to date? And I know that there will be more to come as we get closer to Election Day, but if you want to just mention a few.
Sure. So, and it runs the gamut from our legislators like you, Senator Cheryl Kagan, or Senator King, or Senator Feldman, Lily Chi, one of our local delegates. Also municipalities. I'm thrilled that we have like Judd Ashman, Mayor Gaithersburg. Actually, even one of my former competitors, the former mayor of Rockville, Rose Krasnow, has come out and endorsed me as well. And then we have former congressional leaders like John Delaney, Mike Barnes, and the list keeps growing with the numbers of endorsements.
That's so great. So 4 years ago, the Washington Post endorsed you, and we don't know what's going to happen as of this recording date, and they might choose among the 3 or more candidates. But the Washington Post called you a dynamic political newcomer with business acumen, energy, and passion for innovation. So thoughts about that? Do you think that still applies? And any thoughts about the Washington Post?
Yeah, so I was thrilled when the Post endorsed me 4 years ago, and it immediately gave me credibility. Like all of a sudden people started looking at me differently, even though I was saying the same things.
Yes.
But Cheryl, I absolutely believe that this county needs a fresh perspective. For too long, we've been looking at the same problems through the same lens, and a different leader is going to see things differently and come up with different solutions, have a different team. And when I'm out campaigning, I hear that a lot. Like, we're ready for something new. We're ready for something fresh. Like, you hear that consistently.
Yeah. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you want to just mention?
No, I don't think so. I think we've touched on a lot of good things today. Thank you, Cheryl.
Okay, so the last question before Fast Five is, if people are watching this and they are inspired by you as I am, how can they get involved? How can they help elect David Blair as our next county executive?
So so if you go to our website, and it's Blair for Montgomery.com, there's all kinds of great information there. The best thing to do is sign up as a Blair ambassador. That'll put you on our email list, and then you'll know what events that we're going to be at, what volunteer opportunities there might be, how to get a yard sign, and that type of thing. So that would be the best way to support our campaign. I'd be grateful for that.
Perfect. That's great. Okay, so David Blair, county executive candidate, my county executive candidate. Fast five quick questions to let folks know a little bit more about you. Question number 1. Can you please give us 3 words that for you describe Montgomery County?
Compassion, inspiration, potential.
Nice. What motivates you?
So my wife would say I'm a Boy Scout. So I would say what motivates? I'd say helping others, like lifting others up. Like, I get a lot of energy when I see other people succeed.
Love that. Tell us about one person who has been either your key inspiration or an important mentor for you.
So Nancy Pelosi, and I'll tell you why, because I've been fighting for healthcare for like my whole career, And the leadership that she demonstrated to get the Affordable Care Act passed a decade ago, like I mean, tens of millions of people have insurance today that wouldn't. And then the underlying, what's going on underneath with how healthcare is actually being improved and the outcomes, that's because of the Affordable Care Act that never would have happened without Nancy Pelosi. And so I always think about her leadership in getting that done and how that's truly saved lives.
I love that. And a daughter of Maryland.
Yeah. And she tells me that when I see her. Yeah.
There you go. Question 4, is there a song or a kind of music that is your personal anthem that inspires you and lifts you up?
Well, so my go-to would be like classic rock, right? But we really listen to show tunes. Oh my gosh. Like we listen, like the kids and my wife and I, like we'll put on like The Greatest Showman or Hamilton. We really bounce around, but I will say generally after a long day, I will find something, I'll go either classic rock or 80s or something that's got that hits me in the chest.
I love it. I love it. And question number 5, the one I ask all of my guests, David Blair, what is your hidden secret superpower? What is a skill or talent that you have that most folks can't do?
So it is coming up with win-win solutions. And when you have the kind of the cocktail parties, someone makes a toast to you, I often will hear something like I have an ability to understand what their felt need is, what their problem is. And the first thing I do is figure out what creates a win for you. And then I figure out how to make it a win for all. And I think that's how I had some success in business. And that's the success that I want to bring to county government.
Love it. Love it. Well, David Blair, thank you for your time. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for putting yourself out there again. I am proud of you and impressed by you every time we chat. So thank you. Great. Thanks for joining today.
Cheryl, thank you. I appreciate your leadership and I appreciate you taking the time to interview me today.
Take care. I'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.